7 spiritual teachings to transform fear into strength. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in the human experience. It can imprison us within invisible walls, limit our potential, destroy our peace, and blur our perception of reality. Yet, within every tradition of spiritual wisdom, from the ancient paths of the East to the mystical voices of the West, fear is not viewed as a final sentence. Instead, it is treated as an invitation, an opportunity, a doorway to awakening. Spirituality does not deny fear, it transforms it. This transformation is not a suppression or escape, but a conscious journey inward. It's a process of deep recognition, compassionate acceptance, and empowered transcendence. Fear is not the enemy of the spiritual seeker. It is a misunderstood teacher. When seen through the lens of awakened awareness, fear reveals the parts of us that are ready to be healed, integrated, and liberated. The path toward courage is not the eradication of fear, but the spiritual alchemy that transforms fear into strength. True strength does not arise from resistance, it blossoms from surrender, it awakens in presence. It is forged in the silent chambers of inner stillness, where fear is met not with aggression, but with understanding. This text is a deep exploration of 7 spiritual teachings, rooted in Buddhism, Taoism, Stoicism, Christian mysticism, and other ancient traditions, that guide us through the dark corridors of fear toward the light of inner power. Each teaching is not just an idea, but a lived invitation to shift your consciousness, to embody peace in the midst of uncertainty, and to awaken a strength that no external force can take from you. Let us begin with the first teaching, a cornerstone in the spiritual transformation of fear. Accepting the impermanence of all things, the first spiritual teaching that begins the profound journey of transmuting fear into strength, is the wisdom of impermanence. This insight, central to Buddhism but echoed in Stoicism, Sufism, and Taoism, reminds us that all phenomena, emotions, thoughts, circumstances, identities, relationships, fears, are in constant motion. Nothing stays, everything flows. All things arise, transform, and dissolve. Fear thrives in the illusion of permanence. It convinces us that pain will last forever, that uncertainty will consume us, that loss is an eternal wound. But this is a distortion of reality. When we cling to what is changing, we suffer, and fear becomes the shadow that looms over every experience. To understand impermanence is to break the spell. When we look honestly at our own lives, we find countless examples of change. The thoughts we believed last year are different today. The people we once depended on may no longer be present. The identities we wore in youth have faded. Even our most intense fears from the past have dissolved into memory. This observation is not cause for despair, but for freedom. Because if everything changes, then fear itself is temporary. Spiritual strength begins not by eliminating fear, but by recognizing its fleeting nature. Like a storm that passes through the sky, fear comes and goes. You are not the storm, you are the sky that holds it. This perspective shifts everything. When we feel afraid, we often react by tightening, clenching, fighting, running. But what if we did the opposite? What if, instead of contracting, we expanded? What if we could sit with fear like an old friend, not to feed it or believe its every word, but to watch it with the patience of one who knows, this too shall pass? The Buddhist concept of anicca, or impermanence, invites this attitude. Everything is in flux. Even the self that is afraid is not fixed. The egoic identity that clings to fear is just another passing wave. When we remember that nothing is solid, fear begins to loosen its grip. We begin to watch it rather than be swallowed by it. And this is where strength emerges, not a hard, rigid strength, but a soft, flexible, enduring one. The strength of someone who no longer believes the lies of fear. The power of one who knows that change is constant and that even the darkest night gives way to dawn. Impermanence also teaches us not to fear change itself. Much of our fear is not about what is, but about what might be. We try to control the future, resist the unknown, and preserve the familiar, but clinging to what cannot be held is the root of suffering. When we learn to flow with life, to surrender to the river instead of building dams in our mind, we find a peace that no certainty could offer. This surrender is not passivity. It is presence. It is the realization that we can meet each moment as it comes, without needing to know what comes next, that we can trust ourselves to adapt, to respond, to grow, that life will shape us, but we are not fragile. In moments of fear, return to the breath. Watch it come and go. That simple act mirrors the truth of all things. No breath stays, no thought remains, no emotion is forever. In this simple awareness, the ego's hold begins to dissolve, and a deeper part of you awakens, the part that watches, that knows, that cannot be harmed. To live with the awareness of impermanence is to reclaim your power from fear. It is to remember that even pain changes shape. It is to stop clinging to what must be released and to stop fearing what must come. It is to find in the midst of uncertainty an unshakable inner stillness. When we stop trying to control the ever-changing dance of life, we begin to move with it. Fear becomes less a threat and more a wave we learn to ride. And from this new posture, this spiritual poise, we discover a strength not rooted in control, but in wisdom. Let this teaching guide you the next time fear arises. Instead of resisting it, watch it. Witness its rise and fall. See how it loses power when met with presence. Accept that fear, like all things, is just passing through. And in that acceptance, you will find freedom. If this insight resonates with you and you feel this journey is awakening something within, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more profound teachings that empower your soul and transform your life. Observing without identifying. The path of awareness, fear in its most pervasive form, thrives not merely in reaction, but in identification. It gains power when we confuse the presence of fear with the essence of who we are. When the mind whispers, "I am afraid," it is not stating a passing observation, it is fusing fear with identity, and from this fusion, suffering intensifies. But spiritual traditions across centuries have revealed an alternative, the practice of pure awareness. A witnessing presence that observes without clinging, notices without becoming, and watches without judging. This is not denial, it is clarity. And within this clarity lies the power to dissolve fear at its root. Imagine standing on the shore, watching waves crash and recede. You do not become the wave. You do not chase it or try to hold it. You observe, you allow, you witness, and in doing so, you remain untouched. This is the nature of true awareness, spacious, still, and deeply compassionate. It sees fear arising but does not panic. It sees the tremble in the heart but does not flee. It watches every sensation, every thought, every memory as clouds passing through the sky of consciousness. And in this space, fear begins to lose its ability to dominate. Most of our lives are lived unconsciously, as reactions. A sound startles us, and the body tenses. A memory surfaces, and the breath shortens. A possibility of loss appears, and we spiral into anxiety. These reactions happen so quickly, so automatically, that we never question the assumption underneath them, that fear is something we must obey, but awareness is the great interrupter of this pattern. It pauses the automatic. It creates a sacred gap. In that gap, we begin to see fear is not who I am. It is an experience moving through me. The greatest gift of awareness is separation, not separation from life, but from illusion. When we observe fear, we separate from the belief that we are fear. This shift, subtle and quiet, changes everything. A thought appears, I will fail. In unconscious living, we believe this thought, feel its sting, and act from panic. In awareness, we see it as just that, a thought, a formation of the mind, a string of mental symbols, not truth, not prophecy, just activity, and it passes. This practice is found in the ancient Buddhist instruction, see the arising, see the passing. It is echoed in the Upanishads, where the self is described as the silent witness. It is central to mindfulness traditions and non-dual philosophies, and even modern neuroscience is beginning to affirm what sages have long known. When we can observe an emotion rather than identify with it, we reduce its intensity and reclaim cognitive clarity. But to cultivate this awareness, we must slow down. We must interrupt the habitual momentum of reaction. Fear moves fast. It floods the nervous system, hijacks thought, and narrows perception. Awareness slows us down. It takes a breath before reacting. It pauses before believing. It listens before responding. And in this slowness, we gain vision. In the stillness of awareness, we become able to study fear. We feel its texture in the body, tight shoulders, clenched jaw, shallow breath. We notice its voice in the mind, repetitive, urgent, dramatic. We see how it distorts time, projecting doom into the future or replaying past pain. And we do not resist it. We observe. As one watches a storm from the safety of shelter, we observe the weather of fear from the groundedness of presence. This practice is not about removing fear instantly. It is about developing a new relationship with it. Instead of being ruled by it, we learn from it. We become curious. We ask, what is this fear trying to show me? Is there an unmet need, a wound from the past, an attachment I'm afraid to lose? Fear becomes a messenger, not a master. But to hear its message clearly, we must stop being consumed by it. One powerful method to deepen this awareness is labeling. When fear arises, simply naming it, fear is here, can create a shift. This act of naming returns us to the role of the observer. It reminds us that we are not the emotion, but the consciousness noticing it. Over time, with repetition, this becomes our default. Instead of I'm terrified, it becomes fear is visiting again. And from this subtle change in language emerges a profound change in consciousness. We also begin to recognize the stories fear tells. Fear is a storyteller, and its tales are rarely rational. It predicts disaster. It amplifies risk. It underestimates our resilience. It speaks in absolutes. You'll never recover. Everyone will judge you. You're not safe. When we're unaware, we believe these stories. But awareness shines light on them. It sees the exaggeration. It questions the assumption. It notices that these stories arise when we are tired, stressed, or disconnected from the present moment. Awareness also allows us to track fear's patterns. We start noticing that certain situations consistently trigger fear: public speaking, intimacy, failure, success. And we inquire, what core belief is beneath this? Often it is the fear of being unworthy, unloved, unsafe, but once seen, it begins to loosen, because what is seen cannot control us in the same way. The unconscious becomes conscious, and the spell breaks. To live in awareness is to become a compassionate scientist of your own mind. It is to study without judgment, to notice without resistance. And in doing so, you step out of the storm and into the eye of it, the calm, centered place that is untouched by chaos. Many spiritual masters have said that awareness alone is enough to liberate, that we need not fix, fight, or analyze. We simply need to see, to look clearly, to witness what is, without adding story or shame. This is a radical act in a world addicted to reaction, and yet, it is this simple act of observing that returns us to truth. Fear may still arise, the body may still tremble, the thoughts may still swirl, but in the presence of awareness, they lose their power, because something greater has awakened, the witness, the seer, the presence behind the noise. This presence is who you truly are. It is not afraid. It is not confused. It is not lacking. It simply watches, and in watching it transforms. The more we practice this, the more our inner landscape changes. Fear still visits, but it no longer governs. It becomes a cloud, not the sky, a wave, not the ocean, a whisper, not the command. And in this new way of being, we find freedom. We walk through the world with a quiet confidence, not because fear has vanished, but because we are no longer enslaved by it. We've learned to sit with discomfort, to breathe through tension, to wait instead of react. This is the fruit of awareness. This is the power of non-identification. Let this teaching become a daily practice. Begin your morning with a few minutes of silence, watching the breath. When fear arises during the day, pause and say, "Fear is here. I see you." Let that seeing be enough. You do not need to fix, just watch. Over time, this practice will deepen, and the grip of fear will weaken. You are not the storm. You are the watcher of weather. You are not the fear. You are the space in which fear arises and passes. And in this realization, there is strength. If this teaching has opened a door in your mind or stirred something in your soul, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for more spiritual guidance and deep, transformative insights that awaken the power already within you. Surrendering control and trusting the unseen. Flow of life control is one of the most persistent illusions cultivated by the human mind. It promises safety, stability, and certainty. It convinces us that if we manage every variable, anticipate every outcome, and hold tightly enough to our plans, we can escape suffering. But at the heart of this desire for control lies fear. Fear of change, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. And what we often fail to realize is that the more we try to control life, the more fear grows. Spiritual teachings across time have repeatedly invited us to do something radically different. Surrender. Not as a sign of weakness, but as the highest expression of trust. Not as resignation, but as alignment with the mysterious intelligence that guides all things. Surrender, in its deepest sense, is not the abandonment of responsibility. It is the relinquishment of illusion. It is the moment we stop fighting reality and begin flowing with it. It is the choice to say, "I may not understand, but I trust." And in this shift, fear begins to dissolve, because fear depends on control. Without the need to control, fear has nothing to feed on. When we let go of the belief that we must orchestrate every detail, a vast spaciousness opens within us. It is in this space that spiritual strength is born. The act of surrender is often misunderstood. Many equate it with failure or passivity. But in truth, surrender is the most courageous act a person can make. It is to step into the unknown without armor. It is to stop resisting what is and to trust that life, in all its chaos and complexity, is not against us. It is to recognize that behind the seeming randomness of events lies a deeper wisdom, one that the rational mind may never fully grasp. But the soul does. Fear demands guarantees. Surrender walks by faith. The ancient Taoist sages taught that the highest path is the one that follows the Tao, the way. This is not a fixed route or a rigid law. It is the invisible, flowing rhythm of life itself. Rivers do not push. Trees do not hurry. The moon does not rush its rise. All of nature surrenders, not in despair, but in deep participation with the whole. When we surrender, we return to this natural harmony. We stop trying to force and begin to listen. We stop striving and begin to receive. One of the greatest sources of fear is uncertainty. The mind wants to know, it wants to predict, it wants control over outcomes. But life is inherently uncertain, the future is unwritten, and no amount of planning can guarantee what tomorrow holds. This reality terrifies the ego, but the soul finds freedom in it, because in uncertainty lies possibility, in the unknown lies mystery, and in the absence of control lies the presence of trust. Trust is not the belief that things will always go the way we want. It is the knowing that whatever happens, we will be met with what we need, that even in pain there is purpose, that even in endings there are beginnings, that even in the silence of the void something is being born. This kind of trust cannot be learned through logic. It must be experienced. It must be felt in the bones, tasted in surrender, and anchored through practice. How do we cultivate such surrender in a world that demands control? It begins with awareness. We must become intimate with our own resistance. We must notice how often we try to force outcomes, manipulate timelines, and cling to expectations. We must observe how fear creeps in when life deviates from our plans. And in that observation, we pause, we breathe, we soften. We say the simple words, I release this, I surrender this, I trust this. These words are not magic spells. They are shifts in orientation. They remind the body to relax. They remind the heart to open. They remind the mind to release its grip. And in that releasing, we are returned to presence. The present moment is the only place surrender exists. The mind cannot surrender in the future. It can only do so now. In this breath, in this letting go. And each time we surrender, we build a new habit, a habit of trust. We start to see that life does not fall apart when we loosen our grip. In fact, it often unfolds more beautifully. Opportunities we could not have planned appear. Encounters that feel guided occur. Solutions emerge not through struggle, but through stillness. To surrender is not to abandon desire. It is to release attachment to outcomes. It is to hold dreams lightly, offer effort fully, and let go of the rest. It is to say, I will walk this path with open hands. I will give all that I can, but I will not cling. I will not demand that life bend to my will. I will participate with reverence, not control. Many of the greatest spiritual teachers modeled this kind of surrender. Jesus in the garden saying, not my will but yours. The Buddha under the Bodhi tree, releasing all attachments, Rumi spinning in divine ecstasy. These were not passive souls. They were radiant with inner strength. Because they trusted the unseen. They had let go of needing life to fit their plan. And in doing so they became vessels for something greater. Fear cannot survive in the heart that trusts. It may knock, but it will not stay, because trust creates space. Space for grace, space for flow, space for peace. When we surrender, we stop being the frightened child, trying to control everything and become the wise elder who knows. Life is wiser than I am. There is an intelligence in the unfolding. There is timing I cannot see. There is a rhythm I can only feel. Sometimes surrender happens suddenly, like a great exhale. Other times, it is a daily practice. A constant choosing to release the plan, choosing to let go of the timeline, choosing to say yes to what is. And each time we choose surrender, we step into a deeper strength, not the strength of force, but the strength of flow. This strength is flexible, not brittle. It bends, adapts, adjusts. It listens, responds, and allows. It does not fear the storm, because it knows how to sway with the wind. It does not panic at the wave, because it knows how to float. This is the strength born of surrender. In the moments when fear arises, when plans fail, when outcomes shift, when the unknown looms, return to this practice. Place your hand on your heart, breathe, and whisper, I release this. I trust the unfolding. I'm held by something greater. Over time, these words become not just affirmations, but reality. They become the soil in which peace grows. Spiritual surrender is not a one-time event. It is a path, a way of being, and it leads to a life of grace. A life where fear no longer drives us, but teaches us, where control no longer cages us, but dissolves, where we walk not in anxiety, but in alignment, with the rhythm of the river, with the pulse of the earth, with the wisdom of the infinite. To those who are tired of holding it all together, this is your invitation. Let go, not in despair, but in trust, not in weakness, but in wisdom. Lay down the burden of control, and in that empty space, discover a presence that has been waiting. A presence that says, you were never alone, you were never in control, and you never needed to be. Let go, breathe, trust, and in that trust, find the strength that no fear can touch. If this message speaks to something deep within you, if you feel the quiet power of surrender awakening in your heart, take a moment now to subscribe to our channel for more teachings like this, each one designed to guide your spirit out of fear and into freedom. Embracing the silence within, finding power in stillness. In a world saturated with noise, movement, distraction and demand, silence is often misunderstood. It is feared by many, avoided by most, and underestimated by almost everyone. Yet, in the great spiritual traditions of the world, silence has always been honored not as emptiness, but as fullness, not as absence, but as presence. It is within the vastness of inner stillness that the deepest truths of the soul are heard. And in that hearing, fear loses its authority. When we learn to embrace the silence within, to sit in the sacred stillness of our own being, we begin to encounter a dimension of strength that is not reactive, performative, or aggressive. It is calm, it is rooted, it is eternal. Fear thrives in movement, mental, emotional, and verbal. It is fueled by rumination, by the compulsion to do, by the spinning of the mind's endless questions and what-ifs. Fear shouts, it repeats, it interrupts, it urges us to act before thinking, to speak before understanding, to flee before feeling. But silence teaches us something radically different. It invites us to stop, to become still, to listen beneath the noise. And what we find there, if we have the courage to remain, is something fear cannot penetrate. Stillness is not the absence of thought, but the space in which thought is observed. It is the awareness that watches the mind without judgment, the breath that grounds the body, the attention that rests gently on the present moment. In stillness, we do not deny our fear. We become aware of it. We make space for it. We allow it to reveal its shape, its voice, its need, and in doing so, we remove its power to control us. The practice of stillness requires a turning inward. In a culture obsessed with external stimulation, this can feel unnatural, but the path to peace is inward. It has always been. The mystics of every era, from the Christian desert fathers to the Zen masters of Japan, from the Sufi poets to the yogis in Himalayan caves, all point to the same truth. Silence is the doorway to the divine, and in the presence of the divine, fear evaporates. But silence is not merely the lack of sound, it is the presence of presence. It is the still water that reflects the truth of who we are without distortion. In silence, the ego quiets, the defenses fall, and something ancient awakens. It is this awakening that gives birth to spiritual strength, not the strength to dominate, but the strength to endure, to understand, to transform. Fear often arises when we are disconnected from ourselves, when the noise of the world becomes louder than the voice of the soul, when we are constantly reacting instead of reflecting. Silence returns us to our center. It reminds us that we are not the chaos we encounter. We are the awareness that meets the chaos with calm. In stillness, we learn the art of non-reaction. We begin to respond from depth rather than impulse. We learn to sit with discomfort rather than escape it. We realize that not every thought requires action, not every fear requires a fix. Some things must simply be seen, held, and allowed to pass. This is the wisdom that silence teaches, and yet many resist silence, because to be still is to face oneself, to confront the inner restlessness, the unresolved pain, the buried emotions. But these are not obstacles, they are invitations. The silence does not create discomfort. It reveals what has been hidden beneath the noise. And in that revealing, healing begins. There is a deep intelligence in stillness. It shows us where we are afraid, where we are holding on, where we are out of alignment. It teaches us to observe without judgment, to listen without interruption, to be with ourselves as we truly are. And the more time we spend in silence, the more we begin to trust it. We discover that beneath the fear, there is peace. Beneath the tension, there is clarity. Beneath the confusion, there is knowing. Spiritual strength is not loud, it does not boast or rush. It arises from the quiet conviction of one who has faced their fear and remained still, one who has heard the noise of the world and chosen silence, one who knows that power is not always in doing, but in being. The practice of embracing silence can take many forms. It can be seated meditation, walking in nature without speaking, sitting in a room without devices, simply watching the breath. It does not require technique as much as sincerity. The willingness to be still is enough. The rest unfolds on its own. Over time, silence becomes a refuge, not a place to hide from life, but a place to meet it. When fear arises, we no longer panic. We turn inward. We breathe, we listen, we wait. And in that waiting, we hear the voice of wisdom, the voice that says, "You are safe. You are not alone. This moment will pass. You are held by something greater." Stillness teaches us patience. It reminds us that not everything needs to be resolved immediately, that some answers come not through thinking, but through waiting. That clarity often arrives in the quiet, and that strength is not the absence of fear, but the ability to remain grounded in its presence. The more we practice silence, the more we notice its power in daily life. We speak less, but with more impact. We act with intention rather than reaction. We hold space for others without trying to fix them. We listen deeply to others, to life, to ourselves. And this deep listening becomes our strength. Stillness also reconnects us with the present moment. Fear often lives in the future, in imagined scenarios, in anticipated pain, in unknown outcomes. But silence brings us back to now. And in the now, most fears dissolve, because the present moment, when fully entered, is rarely as threatening as the mind predicts. In fact, it is often filled with beauty, simplicity, and peace. To embrace silence is to trust the wisdom of the moment, to believe that we do not need to solve everything now, that we can sit in the unknowing, that we can allow life to unfold, and that our presence, our awareness, our stillness is enough. There is a sacred power in being with oneself in silence. It is here that we remember who we are beyond roles, stories, and fears. We are not our worries. We are not our past. We are not our thoughts. We are the silent awareness in which all these things appear and disappear, and in that awareness there is no fear, only peace, only clarity, only strength. Let this be your practice. Carve out time each day to sit in silence. Begin with a few minutes. Let it grow. Do not seek results. Simply be. Let the silence do its work. Let it reveal what needs to be seen. Let it hold what needs to be healed, and trust that in this stillness you are being returned to yourself. Silence is not empty, it is full of truth, and when we learn to dwell in it, we become unshakable. If this teaching has resonated with something deep in your spirit, we invite you now to subscribe to our channel for more soul-nourishing content that leads you out of fear and into profound inner strength. The death of the false self, letting go of ego to transcend. Fear. Fear is born in the house of illusion. And the most persistent illusion we inhabit is that of the ego, the false self, the constructed identity, the bundle of stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we have to protect, what we must defend, and what we must avoid to survive. It is this false self that trembles at rejection, resists change, clings to control, and panics in the face of uncertainty. The ego is the birthplace of fear because it is built entirely upon separation, scarcity, and comparison. To transform fear into strength, we must be willing to watch this self die, not physically but psychologically, spiritually, existentially, and in its place allow the emergence of something deeper, vaster, and infinitely freer, our true self. The ego is not evil, it is merely afraid. It was constructed in the early years of life to help us navigate a world of unpredictability and threat. It gave us labels, attachments, defenses, and the illusion of solidity. But what begins as protection eventually becomes a prison. The walls we build to keep pain out soon keep peace out as well. The image we project to be accepted ends up concealing our essence. And the more we identify with the ego, the more vulnerable we feel. Because the ego is fragile. It is always one comment, one failure, one betrayal away from collapse. The spiritual journey is not about improving the ego, it is about seeing through it, and nothing exposes the ego's illusions faster than fear. When fear arises, it is often the ego that is threatened, its image, its story, its control. The deeper self, the soul, is not afraid in the same way. It watches, it witnesses, it waits. It knows that it is not defined by external success or failure. It knows that nothing real can be threatened. And this knowing is the beginning of freedom. To let go of the ego is to stop trying to defend an identity. It is to relinquish the need to be right, to be seen, to be approved. It is to die before we die, to allow the small self to dissolve so that the vastness of being can emerge. This dissolution is terrifying to the mind, but liberating to the soul. Because in that death we discover what cannot die, we discover the eternal. Many spiritual traditions speak of this death in different terms: ego death, the dark night of the soul, the breaking open, the collapse of self. And while the language differs, the essence is the same. The journey through fear leads us to the place where we realize we were never who we thought we were. And from that realization, strength arises, not as a mask, but as presence. The fear of ego death is often mistaken for real danger. The body may tense, the thoughts may spiral, the panic may rise. But when we stay present, when we breathe and observe, we begin to see that what is dying is not us. It is the illusion of us. It is the role, the mask, the identity. And as that illusion fades, a deeper truth is revealed. This truth is simple. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. You are not the story you tell. You are the silence underneath the words. You are not your past. You are the awareness that holds the past in memory. You are not your fears. You are the stillness in which fear rises and falls. The ego resists this truth because it cannot survive it. It wants to be important, permanent, admired. It wants control, but the soul wants freedom, and freedom comes at the price of letting go. Letting go of everything that is not real. Everything that is not essential, everything that was borrowed from others, inherited from culture, assumed in fear. This letting go is not a loss, it is a return to what has always been within you. The unconditioned, unborn, unchanging presence. The self that does not fear because it does not cling. The self that does not panic because it does not pretend. The self that does not need to prove, possess, or perform. In moments of deep fear, we can ask, what part of me feels threatened right now? Is it the role, the identity, the mask? And if so, can I allow it to dissolve? Can I breathe through the collapse of the false self and trust that something truer will remain? This is not easy work. It requires courage, the courage to stop performing, To stop defending, to stop escaping, it requires vulnerability, the willingness to be exposed, uncertain, raw. But it is in this vulnerability that strength is found, not the strength of force, but the strength of truth. When we stop living from ego, we stop being afraid of life. We stop measuring ourselves against others. We stop needing to control outcomes. We stop fearing failure. Because we no longer identify with success, we stop fearing rejection. Because we no longer derive worth from approval, we stop fearing change. Because we no longer cling to permanence. And in this space, a new self is born. Not a self in the egoic sense, but a self in the spiritual sense. The self that is no self, the being that is pure being. This being is not afraid. It walks through life with open hands. It meets each moment as it is. It loves without grasping, acts without clinging, and rests without resisting. It is fluid, spontaneous, alive. It trusts life because it knows it is life. It flows with the river because it remembers it is water, and in this flowing there is peace. The death of the false self is not a single moment. It is a continual unfolding. Layers of illusion fall away over time, stories dissolve, identities shift, masks are removed, and with each shedding we come closer to essence, to presence, to truth. This is the real spiritual journey, not to become more, but to become less. To unbecome everything that is not truly us. And in that unbecoming, we discover a strength that was never lost, only hidden. If fear still visits, that is okay. It is only pointing to the places where the ego still lingers. Each fear is an invitation to let go a little more, to trust a little deeper, to rest a little longer in being. And in this resting, in this trusting, we become fearless, not because we are invincible, but because we are no longer pretending. You are not the role you play. You are not the fear you feel. You are the awareness behind it all. Let the false self die. Let the mask fall. Let the illusion dissolve. And in its place, let the light of your being shine. If this teaching has opened something within you, if you feel the stirring of truth beyond identity, beyond fear, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel for more profound explorations into the journey of spiritual strength, transformation, and awakening.